The German army stood just miles from Moscow. After months of rapid victories across the Soviet Union, it seemed like nothing could stop them. Entire Soviet divisions had been surrounded. Thousands of tanks had rolled across open plains. Cities had fallen one after another. And in Berlin, leaders believed the war in the East was almost won. But then, something changed. The temperature dropped. The snow began to fall. And from the frozen forests outside Moscow, a powerful counterattack was about to explode. One that would shatter. As December 1941 began, the temperature near Moscow plunged far below zero. German soldiers who had marched confidently through Europe were now standing in freezing trenches with summer uniforms, thin gloves, and boots that cracked in the cold. Engines refused to start. Oil thickened inside tank motors. Machine guns jammed at the worst possible moment. Frostbite cases grew every day. Some soldiers lost fingers. Others lost toes. But the worst loss was confidence. For months, German momentum had seemed unstoppable. Blitzkrieg had crushed Poland, France, and much of the Soviet Union's western territories. The strategy relied on speed, surprise, and relentless pressure. But now that speed was gone. The supply lines stretched over 1,000 miles back to Germany. Trains could not deliver fuel fast enough. Trucks broke down in the snow. Horses collapsed from exhaustion. The entire machine that powered Germany's advance was slowing down. Meanwhile, something unexpected was happening behind Soviet lines. Intelligence reports had confirmed that Japan would not attack Siberia in the winter of 1941. That decision allowed Soviet leader Joseph Stalin to transfer fresh, well-trained Siberian divisions to the defense of Moscow. These troops were experienced in winter warfare. They wore white camouflage uniforms. They carried skis for rapid movement across snow-covered terrain. They were prepared for the cold in ways the Germans were not. On December 5, 1941, the Red Army launched its massive winter counterattack near Moscow. It came suddenly and with force. German units, already exhausted and undersupplied, were hit across a wide front. Soviet artillery pounded German positions. Infantry moved quickly through forests and across frozen fields. T-34 tanks, built to handle rough terrain and extreme weather, pushed forward despite the snow. For the first time since the invasion began, the German army was not advancing. It was retreating. This was not a small tactical withdrawal. Entire formations were pushed back dozens of miles. German commanders requested permission to pull back to more defensible positions. Some argued that a controlled retreat would save manpower and stabilize the front. But Adolf Hitler refused. He issued strict orders: no retreat, hold every position, stand fast. This decision would change everything. By forcing units to remain in exposed areas, Hitler prevented flexible defense. Soldiers were ordered to defend. Villages that offered little protection. Many were surrounded. Others barely escaped encirclement. Morale dropped sharply. Officers struggled to maintain discipline. The myth of invincibility that had surrounded the German army began to crack. The Soviet attack was not just about pushing back territory. It was psychological. It proved that Germany could be stopped. It showed that Blitzkrieg had limits. And it gave the Red Army something priceless: belief. The fighting was brutal. Snowstorms reduced visibility. Night attacks became common. German troops often woke up to find Soviet forces already inside nearby positions. Hand-to-hand combat erupted in frozen trenches. Ammunition froze. Wounded soldiers suffered terribly in sub-zero temperatures. Yet despite all of this, the German army did not collapse entirely. Some units held firm under incredible pressure. Field commanders improvised defenses using whatever resources they had left. Makeshift winter clothing was gathered. Damaged tanks were repaired in freezing conditions. The line bent, but it did not completely break. Still, the damage was done. By January 1942, the Germans had been pushed back from the outskirts of Moscow. The capital of the Soviet Union remained in Soviet hands. The quick victory Germany had promised its people was gone. The war in the East was no longer a campaign of rapid conquest. It was becoming a long war of attrition. And this was exactly the kind of war Germany was not prepared to fight. The winter counterattack had shattered Nazi momentum. It exposed weaknesses in logistics, planning, and leadership. It forced Germany into a defensive position for the first time on the Eastern Front. And perhaps most importantly, it gave the Soviet Union time to rebuild factories beyond the Ural Mountains, time to train new divisions, time to prepare for the battles that would follow. Momentum in war is everything. Once it breaks, rebuilding it becomes almost impossible. As the Soviet counterattack continued into early 1942, something deeper was happening inside the German high command. The belief that the Soviet Union would collapse quickly had completely vanished. German generals now faced a reality they had not planned for: a massive enemy that was still fighting, still producing weapons, and still launching large-scale offensives despite losing millions of soldiers in the first months of the invasion. Factories that once stood in western Russia had been dismantled and moved east of the Ural Mountains. Out of reach of German bombers, Soviet industry was coming back to life. New tanks, especially the T-34, rolled off assembly lines in increasing numbers. The Red Army was learning from its early mistakes. Commanders adapted their tactics. Coordination improved. Defensive lines became stronger. Inside the German ranks, frustration grew. Many experienced commanders believed that flexible defense was necessary. They wanted the freedom to pull back from exposed positions and shorten their lines. But Hitler's stand-fast order remained in place. He believed retreat showed weakness. He feared that allowing one withdrawal would cause panic across the entire front. So he demanded that soldiers hold every inch of ground, no matter the cost. This decision created tension within Germany's military leadership. Some generals quietly disagreed. A few were replaced. Others followed orders even when they knew the situation was dangerous. The winter had not only frozen the battlefield, it had frozen strategic flexibility. For the ordinary German soldier, the experience was exhausting. Weeks turned into months of constant pressure. There were no clear victories to celebrate, no dramatic breakthroughs, just cold nights, surprise Soviet attacks, and the constant fear of encirclement. The image of unstoppable German momentum was fading fast. At the same time, Soviet morale was rising. The defense of Moscow became a symbol of resistance. For Soviet civilians, it proved their nation would survive. For soldiers at the front, it proved the German army could be pushed back. That psychological shift was powerful. Wars are not only fought with weapons, they are fought with belief. The winter counterattack did not destroy the German army outright, but it shattered something just as important: the illusion of inevitability. Until that moment, many across Europe believed Nazi Germany could not be stopped. Now, the world saw something different. Germany could be resisted. Germany could be pushed back. Germany could bleed. And once momentum is lost, regaining it becomes incredibly difficult. The Eastern Front was no longer a fast campaign. It had transformed into a brutal, grinding war of attrition. The distances were enormous, the weather was unforgiving, and both sides understood that the coming years would demand even greater sacrifice. This winter marked a turning point not because Germany was defeated immediately, but because its strategy had fundamentally failed. Blitzkrieg depended on speed and shock. The Soviet winter counterattack forced Germany into a prolonged struggle it was not fully prepared to sustain. By the spring of 1942, the battlefield around Moscow had stabilized. The Red Army had pushed the Germans back, but it had not destroyed them. Still, the damage was permanent. The lightning war that was supposed to end the Soviet Union in months had failed. Germany was now trapped in a long, brutal conflict stretching thousands of miles across frozen plains and endless forests. The winter counterattack had done more than move front lines. It changed the entire direction of the war. From that moment on, Germany was no longer fighting for quick victory. It was fighting to recover lost momentum. And that recovery would never fully come. Hitler attempted to regain control of the narrative. He dismissed generals who questioned his orders. He doubled down on bold offensives, believing that one massive strike could restore dominance. That belief would lead to future disasters, especially at Stalingrad. But the root of those later defeats can be traced back to this winter, when the myth of unstoppable Nazi expansion cracked in the snow outside Moscow. For the Soviet Union, this moment was transformational. The defense of Moscow became a symbol of national survival. Soldiers who had once retreated were now advancing. Civilians who had feared collapse now believed in victory. The psychological balance of the war shifted. And in modern warfare, belief can be as powerful as bullets. Internationally, the world took notice. The United States had just entered the war after Pearl Harbor. Britain was still resisting in the West. Now there was proof that Germany could be stopped in the East. The idea of inevitable Nazi dominance began to fade. Confidence among the Allies grew. The winter counterattack did not end the war. It did not bring immediate peace, but it shattered momentum. And momentum in war is everything. Once lost, it is almost impossible to fully regain. The frozen fields outside Moscow became a graveyard for certainty. Certainty that the Soviet Union would collapse. Certainty that Blitzkrieg would conquer all. Certainty that Germany controlled the future. History, plus, shares these stories not just to revisit battles, but to understand turning points, the moments where small decisions, weather conditions, and human endurance combine to reshape global events. The winter of 1941-42 was one of those moments. So here's the question for you. If Hitler had allowed flexible retreats instead of demanding that every inch of ground be held, could Germany have preserved its momentum? Or was the vastness of Russia and the strength of Soviet industry always going to make this war unwinnable? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I genuinely want to hear your perspective. And if this story helped you understand the Eastern Front in a new way, share this video with someone who loves World War II history. These discussions keep history alive. Make sure you're subscribed to History Plus for more deep, clear, and powerful WWII storytelling. Because sometimes it's not the biggest battle that changes a war. Sometimes it's the winter that breaks the momentum forever.